Hey everyone, welcome back. When Mega Man was revealed to be joining Super Smash Bros. In 2013, the announcement came in the form of a super high quality cinematic trailer. It was one of the coolest character reveal trailers, and nearly a decade later, I still pull up the video to watch every once in a while in order to relive the hype. But there was one thing about the trailer that really bothered me. During the first gameplay footage, Mega Man was doing alright, but he almost immediately starts getting wrecked by everyone. Then, he starts using the boss weapons that he's acquired across the classic series to get revenge. Super cool plotline. But then, we get some more gameplay and the video ends. So I've always wondered, does Mega Man get his revenge? Let's find out if Mega Man can beat everyone in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. First of all, how do you even fight everyone in Smash? Well, there's a single-player battle mode called All-Star Mob Smash, where we can fight every single character in Smash, ordered by their original character release date. We start off with the original 4 of Mr. Game & Watch, Mario, Donkey Kong, and Pac-Man, and end with Byleth, who was released in 2019. This is actually an endless mode, where the characters just keep respawning, but here are the rules. Number 1. All 83 fighters in Smash must be defeated at least once. That's it. There's no other rules. After all the characters are defeated, it just loops all the way back to the beginning. This video is not going to be your typical challenge run. It's not a guide or a technical analysis. This is a story. It's a story about my journey to see if Mega Man can defeat everyone in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. There are going to be some twists and turns, but I really hope you stick with it and stay to the end. To lay some groundwork, I'm not a pro Smash player by any means. I think I'm pretty decent at the game, and I've done alright in a few local tournaments, but I'm not starting from a position where I'm absolutely amazing at the game or anything. I used to main Marth in Melee and Brawl, but Mega Man has been my main since the day he came out. I do think I'm alright with other characters, but I really thought I knew Mega Man inside out. After going through this challenge, I realized that I definitely don't. I had never played All-Star Mode before, so when I first came up with the idea, I thought that I'd be able to do it with just the Mega Buster. I thought, hey, I'm pretty good with Mega Man, and I've already been doing the Buster Only challenges in Battle Network, so maybe I can do this Buster Only. I really should have done my research. There are plenty of Reddit and forum threads where people agonize over how difficult All-Star Mode is. And the only videos where I've seen someone who has been able to defeat the mode have used Ganondorf's up smash to cheese everyone, or Kirby's invincible down B to do the same thing. So, my rules on day 1 were to just use the Mega Buster. That meant no boss weapons, no slide, no Shoryuken. The only moves I'd be able to use were neutral A, forward tilt, neutral air, and the charge shot. Heading into this, I thought that I would be facing a bunch of bozo AI enemies who would just stand in front of me, eat a bunch of charge shots, and get blown away really quickly. But entering into the first several attempts, it was actually pretty difficult. I tried changing the controls in order to prevent me from doing basic things like grabbing, but I really had to change my muscle memory for Mega Man, since playing against real people is so different from the AI. During the first several attempts, it was actually surprisingly difficult due to the self-imposed restriction of removing basically 80% of my moves. So, I started off by just spamming charge shots randomly and hoping that the dumb enemy AI would just walk right into it. One thing to note really quickly about the enemies in All-Star Mode is that the damage scaling is very different. Once an enemy is at 30%, it's almost as though they're at 100% in a normal match based on the amount of knockback. I'm sure that there's a formula or a technical way of describing this, but I don't know it and I couldn't find anything about it online. My first several attempts were not great, since it took me forever to get any kills, but I learned 2 things very quickly. Number 1, the charge shot is not good enough to get me through this. I am basically a sitting duck while I charge up, and the minimum power charge shot is just chip damage at best. However, I am able to get 2 kills in a row using my neutral air pellets, and that really surprised me. I've played Mega Man for so long, but I almost never use his neutral air. In that position, I almost always use Flame Sword since it's a solid coverage option, has some okay kill potential, and if I've got enough time, I'll use the reverse aerial rush to get a back air in. So I decided to really look into why this was happening. It turns out that the Nair, or neutral air, has very different hitboxes and knockback stats than the standing neutral or the forward tilt. I always thought that they were all the same, I'm not gonna lie. But as you see here, there are 3 hitboxes that immediately show up in front of Mega Man when he uses his Nair, versus just 1 directly in front when he uses his neutral. This is when, for the first time in my long history of playing Smash, I decided to actually look into and learn about knockback. All of the information here is courtesy of the Super Smash Bros. Wiki, and I'll leave a link in the description below, so huge thanks to the folks over there for the hard work that they've done. When looking at the knockback stats for Mega Man's neutral air, those 3 hitboxes in front of Mega Man have a base knockback of 60 and a knockback scaling of 150. I don't know what that means. Is that good? Is that bad? So basically, every hitbox of every move has 2 values, a base knockback value and a knockback scaling value. From my research, a base knockback is the minimum amount of knockback that an attack can have. Attacks with a high base knockback, for example, will send an enemy flying a decent amount even if they have 0% damage. However, knockback scaling determines how far an enemy goes when the enemy is at higher percentages. So for example, Luigi's forward smash doesn't really send enemies very far when the enemy's at low percentage, but as the damage percentage increases, Luigi's forward smash's killing potential increases really quickly. Now, let's go back to the neutral air stats. I don't know if those numbers are any good or bad, so let's start benchmarking them against some of the other attacks in the game. For example, here are the stats for Mario's forward smash. It's actually quite a bit lower than the neutral air. Actually, let me throw up the knockback data for some of the stronger attacks in the game. Here's Ike's forward smash as a point of comparison. Somehow, Mega Man's neutral air still stands out. What about Ganondorf's forward smash? It has a base knockback of 61 versus the neutral air's base knockback of 60. Now that is a surprise. Based on this data, those 3 hitboxes in front of the Mega Man's neutral air are among the strongest attacks in the game in terms of knockback. We might actually have a chance after all. Really quickly though, how does that compare to Mega Man's charge shot? Surprisingly, that neutral air is a lot higher. With this newfound knowledge, I decided to start using Mega Man's Nair much more frequently. With that level of knockback, perhaps I can just go for one-hit KOs as soon as the enemies spawn, and use charge shots when I need to deal with crowds, or if the enemies are close-range attackers and I can keep my distance. I start making some progress, but it's actually a lot harder than I thought to consistently get that short-hop Nair hit. The irony here is that despite Mega Man being a ranged attacker focused on spacing, I basically need to get right up as close as possible to actually kill enemies. That also leaves me very vulnerable to getting attacked. And as we beat more enemies, the AI gets smarter. We're going to go into exactly how the characters interplay with one another very soon, so please just stick with me. During one of my earlier runs, I make it to 15 kills, but through some inadvertent button combination, I accidentally grab Ridley. In order to avoid other attacks, I actually went into the controls and unmapped the grab button. I also wanted to unmap the B button, but I needed it for up B in order to maintain my recovery. So despite making it to 15 kills, I manually reset here. There was another run that I went for neutral air, but accidentally input a forward air, and I had to reset. My plan was basically to run to Mr. Game & Watch as soon as he spawned, and snipe him with a well-placed Nair. Then, I'd hope that I'd have enough time to do the same for Pac-Man. However, this wasn't 100% consistent, and I would mess up and take damage during several of these runs, leading to quick resets. If I missed, Donkey Kong would be super opportunistic, and he can do a lot of damage in a hurry. At some point, I'm able to string together some well-placed neutral airs, and I have a few breakout runs. But that's when we get to one of the first obstacles in the game. Bowser. Bowser is number 12 on the roster, meaning that he comes out when you have 8 kills and 4 enemies on the field. The AI really changes after Bowser comes out, but we'll come back to that. One of the strategies I come up with is actually just to hang on the ledge, take advantage of the invincibility frames, and draw our enemy towards us. Once they're close enough, we roll behind them, turn around, and snipe them with a nair, only to go back to the edge and do the same thing again. But that stops working very quickly as the AI changes and the character mix shifts to more projectile-based characters. In a little bit, I'm going to start going through the actual roster. My best run on day 1 was 24 kills, and after a few hours, I decide that it's time to call it a day. The real issue is that around this time, there are a number of projectile spammers that all spawn very closely, including Samus, Pit, Simon, Palutena, Ryu, Ken, and Mega Man. Even though Ryu and Ken are Street Fighter characters, their Hadokens effectively serve the same purpose when the AI is just sitting back and spamming. But like I said, we'll get back to the characters in a bit. On day 2, I feel like I've got my strategy and I've just got to execute it. But it's easier said than done, and in my absolute best run, I only get to 27 kills. I just can't get close enough to most of the projectile spammers, and even when I beat them, I just take way too much damage during this process. I'm actually able to get to 27 kills multiple times, but at this point, almost any attack from any character can end your run, and we've got Sonic and Yoshi spinning around all over. After a few more days of trying this, I realized the Buster Only is not going to work. We've made some crazy progress, but have only made it 1/3 of the way through the roster. So I decide that instead of making this Buster Only, maybe our challenge can be no boss weapons. After all, in the original video, Mega Man gets wrecked until he brings out the Metal Blade. So I decide that we can include our down tilt, Mega Man Slide, and the up tilt, the Shoryuken. The down tilt is a really good option for crowds of enemies, since the Buster can only hit one at a time, but the slide can help us clear many enemies out if they're all bunched together. However, the real prize here is Shoryuken. Getting the sweet spot here on Mega Man's up tilt is spectacular, since it comes out on frame 6, does 17 damage, and has a pretty big hitbox. Here are those same knockback stats from earlier. The biggest issue though is that the Shoryuken has an extreme amount of landing lag. I start seeing some crazy progress right away, as the Shoryuken helps us get rid of the early enemies pretty quickly. I'm starting to consistently make it a little farther, and break through my record of 27, getting to 30 kills. But we're running into similar issues as before, where, just like with the neutral air, we have to get very close to our enemies in order to pull off a sweet spot Shoryuken. The projectile spammers are still problematic, because Pit's arrows disrupt our actions, taking us out of our charge shot. Another issue I run into during this iteration of the challenge is the buffered inputs. In order to execute an up tilt, I have to hold the up button on the joystick and press A while on the ground. I turned off tap jump in my custom controls so I don't jump when I press up on the joystick, which is the default setup. However, if I get hit and press the inputs for Shoryuken, I'll start falling off the platform and my input will still be buffered, and I'll use the air shooter, better known as the tornado up air. This is technically a boss weapon, so I reset whenever I hit an enemy with it, regardless of how far I am in a run. During my best run thus far, I get to 36 kills, and then I run into one of the most annoying enemies in the game, Falco. Now's probably a good time to explain what I'm doing at each phase, and specifically how I'm handling particular enemies. But this is also the right time for a time skip. After several days of continuing to try All-Star mode with no boss weapons, I finally realized that this is too much for me, and I decide to lift all of the restrictions. I am nowhere close to 83 kills. There's probably a reason that Mega Man had to resort to the boss weapons in the video, so I say hey, let's give it a try. Now, we're going to talk about specific characters, some of the roadblocks, and some actual strategies I developed over the course of trying this challenge basically a billion times. I'm going to mix up the footage from different attempts here, but all of these attempts where everything is allowed come after nearly 500 attempts with Buster only, and then boss weapons only. Phase 1. Dummies. The first 8 enemies in the game are as close to free as you can get. We start off by trying to snipe Game & Watch with a neutral air, but it really doesn't matter whether or not it works. We're going to take advantage of the rightmost platform where all of the enemies will congregate. I'm going to shield and dodge in order to get into optimal position to get the sweet spot for Shoryuken. For example, if the enemy is right in front of me, great. It's super easy to get a Shoryuken in. If there's some distance between us, I have 3 options. 1, I can wait for the enemy to come up to me and then boom. 2, I can walk up to them and risk getting hit by something. Or 3, I can use a dodge and roll right behind them. So given that that's the safest option, I keep doing that until I get the first several enemies. However, that's where the easy part ends. Now on to Phase 2, Mario, Zelda, and Metroid. Here we get an interesting mix of 6 characters from 3 franchises that start arriving all in a row. Peach, Bowser, Link, Zelda, Samus, and Ridley. At this point, the AI changes pretty significantly. Every enemy up to this point has just followed us onto the platform, but Bowser actually stays below. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but all of the other enemies seem to just want to get us off the platform and into Bowser's clutches. He'll also come below us and use attacks that go through the platform in order to inflict damage on us. Peach and Zelda aren't really major problems, but Link, Samus, and Ridley really are. Link can stay far away and use his arrows, and his shield blocks our pellets and charge shot. Samus can basically do the same thing, minus the shield. She charges up her blaster and stays at a far distance. Ridley is a monster because he can do both. He can use his fireballs and come close to us and do some massive damage. He also has a command grab which can grab us through our shield. In order to deal with this, we can take the approach of either getting rid of the lighter characters like Link, Peach, and Zelda, or getting rid of the heavies. There's a little bit of a gap between Bowser and Ridley showing up, and I definitely don't want both of them to be on the screen at the same time. This is not a phase where I died very often, except for one of Bowser's surprise attacks here and there, but it is notable given the change in AI. Moving on to Phase 3, this is the one that indirectly ended most of my runs, the projectile spammers. Here, we fight Simon, Pit, Palutena, Snake, Ryu, Ken, and Mega Man, all basically in a row. If Link or Samus are still on the field from the prior phase, that just makes it worse. Even though Ryu and Ken are fighters, as I mentioned, their Hadokens are not fun. This is the part of the run where you can really rack up damage super quickly and not even realize it. Snake's bombs, Pit's arrows, Palutena's homing attack, Simon's, spam of everything, and, Mega Man's spam of everything. Nothing really kills you, but you rack up damage so quickly that it puts you in position to get wrecked really easily in later phases. My strategy here is to effectively interrupt their attacks with my Metal Blade or Leaf Shield, and then use the top spin or dash attack to finish them off. Obviously, if I'm in position to get a Shoryuken in, that's the number 1 choice. But another surprisingly great choice is my up smash, the Spark Shock, which might actually be the MVP of this run alongside the Shoryuken. Let's talk about how it works for a second. It's a very long attack that effectively has 6 hitboxes. The first 5 don't have any knockback and basically stun the enemy, while the last one is a slightly bigger hitbox that sends enemies flying. That last hit is the money shot that gets all the kills, but using it on the middle platforms isn't a one-hit KO like the Shoryuken. If the enemies have some damage or are exceptionally light, it might kill them, but really only the Shoryuken and neutral air have been consistently able to kill on the second platforms. The up smash does kill on the topmost platform though. One of the strategies I develop is to just stay on the upper platform and use up smash as soon as the enemies spawn, similar to how I dealt with the first phase of enemies. That way, I don't give the projectile enemies a chance to even spawn. This is less of an issue with the projectile enemies, but you'll see later that the up smash strategy is not entirely consistent. This is because the spark shot is interruptible. If we get hit by anything before we get to our last hitbox, then it's very unlikely to kill. Given that it's such a long attack and we're on the topmost platform, we are super vulnerable. Enemies can spawn and basically hit us immediately, or anything below us can hit us with an aerial. I try to have my shield up or dodge as often as possible, but there's also startup lag to consider. One of the major benefits of the Spark Shock is that it's nearly as fast as the up tilt, coming out in 8 frames versus 6, but it also has much less ending lag and actually comes out of shield much faster. Anyway, the goal of Phase 3 is to not rack up damage. Towards the end, Hero also joins, but he has an interesting and very different AI. I really believe that there are a few characters, like Bowser, who are just programmed entirely differently. Hero typically doesn't do much, as he stays on the bottom floor. When he does do something, it's completely random and there's nothing you can do. I died to his neutral attack, Kafrizz, so many times, as well as his menu attacks like Thwack, which is an instant kill. But most of the time, I let him live so that I'm only fighting 3 enemies at a time, especially when I'm on the upper platforms. Based on that, you might be wondering, why don't I just target and fight 1 enemy so I can beat the more difficult ones one at a time and not have to worry about fighting multiple difficult enemies at the same time? Well, believe it or not, I really did try this. But the issue is that the first 8 enemies are all super dumb and they will chase you and run up to you no matter how much you run away. So I almost have to kill them, otherwise I'm going to start racking up damage very quickly. At some point, I tried being on the topmost platform and tried keeping Bowser alive since he stays on the bottom floor. But even Bowser, after a while, changes his strategy and comes join us at the top floor. Trying to cherry pick just doesn't work, unfortunately. Once we get through all the projectile enemies, we move on to Phase 4, which is actually a little bit of a reprieve. Marth, Daisy, Dr. Mario, Captain Falcon, Yoshi, and Sonic. None of them are really a projectile threat, meaning that I can just stay far away and charge shot at them for the most part. I still died a good amount at this stage because if I did poorly against the projectile spammers, all it takes is one spammy Sonic homing attack and I'm done. Or any good play from Captain Falcon or Marth. Overall though, Phase 4 is a breath of fresh air, and it's really hard to describe how much of a mental toll it is to keep track of so many different things on screen at once. After we get through that first part of Phase 4, we have to fight Terry, Kirby, King Dedede, and Wario. Similarly, most of those characters are not really threats, especially because we can always knock back King Dedede's Gordos with the charge shot. The real terror here though is Wario, since his motorcycle attack is quick, does a lot of damage, and makes him immune to a lot of our attacks. I basically just need to kill Wario as quickly as possible. You may notice that I'm actually using the dash attack quite a bit. I'm going to go into that in a second. Phase 5 is Projectile Spam Part 2. Here, we've got Fox, Falco, Meta Knight, Richter, Ness, Diddy Kong, K. Rool, and Kazuya. But the reality is that almost all of them are non-threats, except for Falco and Ness. Fox's laser is fast, but doesn't stun you, whereas Falco's laser does stun you. If I'm in the middle of something, it takes me out of my action and I have to start over. This impacts all of my attacks, including my up smash. Fox and Falco also have reflectors, and Ness can absorb my Mega Buster as well. Most of these enemies just stay on the other side of the field and spam their lasers or PK Thunder, and force you to come at them. I start using the Leaf Shield to give myself a little bit of protection, as well as release it so that I can approach them and use my top spin dash attack to hopefully get close enough and kill them off with the last hit, which does have a decent amount of knockback. I really can't understate how annoying Falco is though. You might wonder, why even bother dealing with them? Why not just stay at the top and use the up smash trick? The issue here is that Ness will just get you with PK Thunder, and it's not like Falco isn't a good close range attacker either. At this point, enemies will just start coming up to you and using their aerials, which will regularly interrupt my up smash and not let me get to the last hit, which kills. I could also do the up tilt Shoryuken, but there's a lot going on and there's a high cost to missing. The Shoryuken does give a few frames of invincibility, which can be helpful, but there's so much end lag and so many projectiles flying around. Another thing I try to do is use the air shooter or the tornado up air as soon as enemies spawn, but this only works on the absolute lightest of enemies. Once we get rid of the second wave of projectile spammers, we get to Phase 6, Pokemon and Final Fantasy VII. This phase is also the mathematical halfway point, as the Pokemon are numbers 43 to 46, meaning that we've killed 42 of the 83 fighters. A bunch of Pokemon come out in a row, including Pikachu, Jigglypuff, Pokemon Trainer, and Mewtwo. They're followed by Cloud and Sephiroth, and I'm just going to throw Wolf in there as well. The smaller Pokemon are usually easy kills, but Pikachu is one of the strongest and fastest characters in the game, and Jigglypuff can always get away with doing her random rolly thing. Charizard also has a side B that comes out insanely quickly if you're not paying attention. There's so much going on screen at once, and at this point almost everything is a threat. But the real monsters of this phase are Mewtwo and Sephiroth. They basically just stand there and spam their B attacks, and if anything hits you, you're done. Mewtwo also has a bunch of really strong aerials. As you try and navigate your way through all of the other attacks, Mewtwo can come up to you and fair you at any given point. Wolf here presents many of the same issues as Falco. In competitive 1v1 Smash, Wolf is one of, if not the, absolute worst matchups for Mega Man. But here, I'm really just worried about Mewtwo and Sephiroth. They ended the run so many times, especially because Sephiroth's B attack in particular has such a large area of effect. Once we're done with Mewtwo and Sephiroth, you come to what I call Phase 7. It's actually really hard to describe anything going on here because the stakes are so high. I'm usually trying to just avoid being hit, DI whenever I do get hit, and make it back to the stage, and there's almost no let-up in terms of the attacks coming at you. Most of the enemies here are pretty manageable and don't have much killing power, such as Sheik, Olimar, Villager, and Sora, and I'm able to try picking them off one by one. But the real monster in this phase is Ganondorf. Oh Ganondorf. At this point, I'm tired, I'm mentally exhausted, I'm usually at 200, 250, almost 300 damage percentage, and Ganondorf does not need a lot of room to punish a single mistake. I died time and time again from Ganondorf randomly doing a smash attack that I wasn't prepared for, since I cannot stress enough the number of calculations that I'm thinking through. It is so easy for me to look back at the footage and say, oh, I should have done that. But I'm making so many split-second decisions, and I have to keep track of exactly who's on the screen, where they are, what they can do, what their AI is thinking, and who I can run to next in order to get another kill. After almost 800 attempts, in my absolute best run, I got to 58 kills out of 83 characters. That is 69.9%, just below 70. In my last attempt, I was able to kill 57 out of 83 characters, or basically 69%. Nice. But at this point, it had been weeks of trying. My fingers were in a lot of pain. My morale was in the gutter. I thought that this would be an easy and quick video to keep people interested as I work on Battle Network 3, but holy, I was not expecting this. I had a few strategies that worked for certain phases, but the AI kept changing its plans and taking those away from me. Even when I got lucky and was able to implement the strategies that worked, most of them were very high risk and high reward, such as up smash and up tilt on the platforms. As you can probably tell from the footage, I was also starting to get into some really bad habits, spamming attacks sometimes, or just straight up not noticing things that were happening in real time. Everything was starting to blur and blend together, and the dark background of the Wily stage wasn't helping. So, I decided it was time to step away. I needed to take some deep breaths and focus on what's important. And there's a reason I feel comfortable doing that and uploading this video. One of the things that I've learned about myself since starting this channel basically a month ago is that I don't know nearly as much about the games that I love as I thought I did. And that's a wonderful and humbling realization. All of you in the comments have been so supportive and have provided amazing feedback on the videos I've put out so far. In Battle Network 1, I used invisibility chips against Base because I didn't think it was possible to avoid his attacks, and I got a ton of feedback from folks about methods to beat him without any chips at all. I'm working really hard on getting out more Battle Network content, and I'm so excited to redo that fight without any support chips. In Battle Network 2, I spent forever grinding against enemies for Zenny because I didn't know about resetting for mystery data drops. I could have saved so much time. In Pokemon Crystal with only Fire Blast, which, by the way, if you haven't checked it out yet, please give it a watch, it would really help the channel. In that run, some of you shared item suggestions that would have really changed how I faced Red in the final battle. So, can Mega Man beat everyone in Smash Ultimate? The answer, for me, for now, is not yet. I would have loved nothing more than to give you all a nice, well-wrapped present with a bow on top, but I can't do that right now. However, I'm confident that with all of your support, comments, feedback, and suggestions, we'll absolutely be able to make it happen. The way I see it, when I was constantly restarting and trying to pick off Mr. Game & Watch with my neutral air time and time again, this was just my story. The story of a guy who's trying to do something that may be absolutely thankless and pointless. But now that this video is out there and all of you are watching and commenting and supporting, this is no longer just my story. This is the story of all of you who want to see Mega Man succeed. So please like, comment, subscribe, and I'm here to listen to all of your suggestions and feedback on how we can get Mega Man the revenge he deserves. I'll do my best to integrate that feedback, keep giving this challenge some more tries, and hopefully follow up with a victory. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see you next time.